Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Genuine Chit-Chat. This week, I talk with my buddy Wayne and my buddy Josh. Now, Josh does the Science But Simple mini-series with me that some of you may know of, and Wayne is a returning guest. He's a friend of mine who's a paleontologist and also an author, and he's been on the podcast, it was a few episodes ago now, but they're both really great, definitely worth checking out. Now, I want to get Josh and Wayne both on at the same time. They're both very scientifically minded people, Josh having a degree in marine biology and Wayne having one in paleontology, so I thought it would be good to have them both on, just to have a chat about a few things. Now, although I haven't named it Part 1 and Part 2, this one is a two-parter, contrary to that, and essentially this part is about superpowers and stuff, which sounds really odd, but we got talking about it and like how it would work in the real world and sort of the logistics behind why you'd want superpowers in this way or that way and that sort of thing. So we kind of get into superpowers, like what we'd be given if we were like a character in a show, some sort of ironic thing, and then also what we would choose if we could have anything. So we get into that a little bit. We then get onto some more serious topics. We speak about the apocalypse, population control and hunting, including talking about human culling, utilitarianism, suicide, stem cells and abortion, anti-natalism. So there's a lot going on. So it's a really, really good episode. And in next week's episode, as I said at the start, which is also going to be with Wayne and Josh, we talk about religion and faith, paleontology, and discuss our sort of favourite animals, sort of notable ones that are marine, land, and extinct. So, make sure you listen to that one as well, especially if you're a fan of the paleontology episode I released with Wayne a couple of months ago. Now, before the show gets started, just a quick shout out to Jerome of the Cloth Talk podcast. He interviews people not dissimilarly to the way I do. Essentially, our shows have a similar vein of idea behind them, of just talking to people who are interesting as their guests. So, if you like the format of this podcast, be sure to go check out the Cloth Talk podcast. I'll be sure to put a link in the description, that sort of thing. And the most recent episode, they spoke about the N word. So, recommend go listen to that if that's the sort of thing you're interested in, like certain taboo words, that sort of thing, and obviously historical racism, all that sort of jazz. So, yeah, shout out to the Cloth Talk podcast. Go check those guys out. And just before getting started, a promo by the Dadcast Unknown podcast, and then straight onto the show. Thanks as always, guys, for tuning in, and I'll be back at the end.
Hi, my name's Ian.
And I'm Chris.
And we host a podcast called Dadcast Unknown,
where every 2 weeks we talk about being a dad and being a nerd, and sometimes being a nerdy dad at the same time. We'll talk about everything from movies to comics.
Find us on Facebook, Twitter, iTunes at Dadcast Unknown, and also on any of your most popular podcatcher apps.
Join us, laugh with us, make fun of us. As long as you're listening, we don't care.
That's a good way to end it.
Welcome to Genuine Chit-Chat, where we have honest conversations with interesting people. And I'm your host, Mike Burton. Hey, I get SpongeBob references too. SpongeBob's amazing.
It's like, hey pal, I'm just rolling from Stupid Town. It would just have him laughing every single freaking time. It's like, now I'm the guy with the broom. It's just brilliant.
Love it. Absolutely. SpongeBob was just one of my... SpongeBob and Fairly Odd Parents. They were both my go-to shows when I was a kid.
Definitely.
Love that stuff. Also, when I was a bit younger, Johnny Bravo, Dexter's Lab,
Yes.
Powerpuff Girls.
Get out of my laboratory.
Didi, get out of my laboratory. It doesn't sound anything like him, but still.
Oh, mama. Love it.
Yeah, Johnny Bravo was king.
And Ed, and Eddie as well.
Oh, yes.
Insanely large gobstoppers, just amazing.
That was such a good show.
Just your sister's called Double D. There's a sex reference in there. Boom. It's brilliant.
It's so good. Love Double D, Eddie, and Ed. I loved Ed. I love chickens, Edo.
Swing your pants down. Oh God. I so inbred, it's ridiculous, but
it's pretty funny. And it's when it's like when they go into his house, like, what are you doing, man? And he's like eating his whole bed. And it's like, what? What's going on? It just never gets brought up ever again. You're like, what? It's a very strange but fantastic show.
Yeah.
Every character is so weird. Mm-hmm. Plank. just there was that one episode where he went missing, wasn't it? Like, and it ended up, it was a weird thing where he kind of was self-aware almost, because it was like loads of weird stuff was happening and they're like, oh, Johnny just keeps doing it. And then one time something happened, Johnny was like, hey guys, and what's Plank doing? It's like, wait, that wasn't you. It's like, of course it's not me, it's Plank. It's like, wait, what? And it's like, so is Plank actually alive? Like, that's the important questions we have. I have a paleontologist on the podcast and a marine biologist, and we talk about Ed and Eddie.
Yeah.
But anyway, I've already started recording, so slick.
as much. You do that.
Yeah, it's the podcasting way now, right? It makes it less. Well, I wouldn't say awkward necessarily, but it's just a bit less, cut through the let's everyone stop conversation so I can talk. But as you have stopped the conversation, now I can talk. Another episode of Genuine Chit-Chat. I'll have probably spoken about it in the intro. So here we are, Wayne and Josh. I do want to talk about animals and stuff because that's what we were talking about, but I'll come back to that because I actually want to talk about that superhero conversation we were having because I think that was hilarious, and that's where I kind of want to start, and we'll get onto the animal sort of stuff in a bit. But Josh, when we were sat here chatting and stuff, and I was setting up, you asked the question of, there you go, you can give it to you.
So two kind of, I guess in a way they're kind of like questions that would feel quite benign, but I think they carry quite a lot of in terms of probing people about what they think about themselves, as well as what they think they'd like to be, almost in that way. It's a fact of the superpower that you think that you would have, as you are.
Almost given.
Yeah.
It's almost like if you're written in a story, like anime is a good example. If you're written into a story, you have some sort of, maybe even ironic sort of thing that's to do with your personality, your person. You go through a weird radioactive incident and then you get this, compared to if you had absolute choice over anything, what would you choose? Yeah.
And then the second question is what you would actively choose if you were I don't know, you were presented with a selection of superpowers at the beginning of something and I want that one.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there we go. Why don't you shoot us off with your... Also, I was going to say as well, when we were talking about it, I was trying to think of it in trying to be a bit realistic about it in if today, now, we got this power, what the implications would be. For example, we could use, if you could go invisible, for example, then you would have to be kind of low-key about it, because if anyone found out, then eventually the army, or the government rather, would probably try and get a hold of you in some way, because then they'd want to use the DNA or whatever to find out if they can make the soldiers invisible, blah 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 blah. So if you want to shoot off with your one, then if you want to do the one you'd be given as a character.
Given as a character, I'm going to change my mind from what I think I was thinking earlier, because earlier I was thinking about how I'm much more like a thinking person. I'm I'm very slim, and I was thinking more about something not on the scale of X-Men Charles Xavier, but some sort of mental thing.
Right.
But retroactively, I think I actually think about my nature in terms of what I like, what I've done for my degree and all that sort of thing. I'd probably say water breathing.
Okay.
So maybe not actively having gills, but being able to still breathe in water.
Is a good one.
Or
you could create
potentially
a bubble.
indefinite holding your breath or something like that.
Yeah, you could even have a bubble that you somehow you exhale when you're underwater, somehow a lot of oxygen in some way of you've got this weird little bubble thing around your mouth, so when you breathe in and out you're somehow getting enough oxygen, sort of thing. That'd be quite...
That's not... Even then, just being able to look, gills.
You grow gills. There's that guy in X-Men First Class, he's the one who's adaptive.
Darwin.
Yeah, that's it.
He called himself Darwin.
Yeah.
I actually just felt that wouldn't even be a bad thing. That sort of thing. My prevalence for biology and general evolution, that would probably suit me quite well, to be honest.
Yeah, well, just a pretense, because people may not... actually, I'd have said it in the intro, but just to reiterate, obviously you've got a degree in marine biology, and Wayne's got a degree in paleontology, so they're kind of similar vein to a degree. They have similarities in their fields.
To some degree, biology-based.
Yeah, it's about living beings, isn't it? It's not none of them are specifically physics.
No longer living beings.
Well, science joke. So you think that would be your one then, the sort of breathing underwater / adaptive?
Yeah, the adaptives. I think now that you've mentioned that, Darwin in X-Men First Class, the whole I feel like I wouldn't take it to the point of where he can adapt to very much anything, but in terms of natural adaptations like the growth of gills, or be able to make my skin scaly and waterproof or something like that sort of thing, rather than actually being able to almost turn yourself to stone to try and defend against something, but much more in terms of animalistic adaptation.
Okay, that's cool. What about you, Wayne? What would if it was given to you as a character?
If it was given to me, it would probably be something like the Flash, so super speed, because the one commodity that we don't have enough of is time. But you see through the Flash series that he goes back and freaking there's so many time paradoxes and all these different kinds of things, and you've got like the butterfly effect, all this kind of stuff. So there's loads of stuff like hindering you, like going back in time and all this stuff. But if you have super speed, you can vibrate your cells at the point where they can get to absolute zero. So you could actually like prevent yourself from aging, even though probably like the first layer of molecules around you would just be like solid, you know, they'd just be in a fixed state of absolute zero, which obviously they wouldn't interact with anything. But you know, in a sense, you'd be distant from everything, but you'd get so much done. Like everything that you'd normally take a whole day to do, you'd just be able to do it in like 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's good, because obviously one of the things as well is that you're obviously an author because you've been on the podcast before, but you've just you basically finalised your, is it your fourth book now?
Third.
I always get them confused because you were telling me details of a fourth book, but you've got like 14 ideas or something. You've got 2 published, 2 that are in the pipeline, 1 that's pretty close to being done, and then another like 8 to 12 that are like in the air as well. So yeah, you having more time makes a lot of sense. I think my one would be one of 2, which are basically very similar vein that I spoke, or both at once, why not? Which would be, because I'm very loud, obviously, a lot of the time, especially in social situations, it would be the scream that Banshee has in X-Men First Class. Be able to scream really loud, everyone be able to hear it, whatever, and it'd be a powerful shockwave that could deafen people and stuff. But then also the other thing which would be the mental communication, like telepathy communication. So I could talk to anyone on the planet, and they could hear me, and I could hear them. Just kind of tune in to that sort of thing. Because there's that character in Fairy Tale, isn't there, Josh?
Warren.
Warren, yeah, him.
Although he does have the.
He can read people's minds. Yeah, he can read people's minds and communicate. I don't think I'd have the mind reading thing. That'd be kind of cool, but you know, I can't. That's not an ironic thing of my power. Of it would be to be able to talk to anyone on the planet. So I think that'd be quite a cool one. Now the choose ones, which are way more like, here's one that you're given. Yeah, you can do these sort of things. Then one's one you can choose. It's like, let's go overkill, just ridiculous. Like, would you want to start us off, Josh, with your what you choose? If you could do anything at all.
Ironically, now that I've changed my first one, that I think I would have. The second one actually kind of leads on from it quite well, in the fact that I'd probably go for something that would be complete free-form shape-shifting.
Yeah.
Like, I could just... It's like, I don't know. To keep what we said before, I want to go swimming. Let's grow some gills.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know. I'm kind of running late. I want to do something. Let's just become a bird and skip traffic because no one can be asked to deal with that.
Oh yeah, that'd be, if I could turn to like a bird or something, that'd be the best. Like, is it the Swift? That's one of the fastest.
Peregrine falcon.
The falcon, okay. I know the Swift is one of the fastest.
Like the fastest bird in terms of that sort of thing.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. Because is that kind of falcon local in England?
You find it in England, yeah.
There's a pair of them down Southampton Docks.
Oh, are there?
Actually, yeah.
Huh, that's really nice. Okay, so and you would obviously, when we were speaking about that whole the being able to shapeshift thing, would you be like, what was it that you said about the mantis shrimp, Wayne?
Yeah, it's it claps its claws together and it sends like a shock wave to basically it paralyzes its prey just through concussion. But the heat exchange of clapping its claws together is either equal to or greater than the temperature of the sun. Like in that split second of it clapping, it's like the friction caused is like an infinitely
like
the point where the little pocket of water, there's like bubbles that appear and it's like there's no air being produced. It's just from the temperature there for the mantis shrimp, it's rapidly boiling that small pocket of water just in front of what they're doing, which is like a huge amount of expansion of that gas. It's like
Yeah, I see. Oh, imagine having that as the human equivalent of that.
You just do that.
It'd be like clapping and creating a concussion grenade. Just be like, wow, that's insane.
Just
clear a room.
Mantis shrimp man. Or mantis shrimp boy.
Yeah, like it's like I talked about something in terms of if you could do like almost a perfect copy of something, but you had to have like almost like a genetic blueprint for it. Like if you rubbed your finger on someone's toothbrush or something, and then you say, "Oh, I have their like DNA fingerprints. Well, I can now basically become a perfect copy of them."
Yeah, and we were talking about how because we've discussed this before the podcast a bit, and we're talking about like the idea of even one step further than that, because I brought up the idea of, I think it's naked mole rats, they can't get cancer. And it was like, if you could somehow understand it to such a level where anything that you got the sort of DNA blueprint of, you could extract parts from each of them. So you could be like, okay, I've got the skin, like pigments of, naked mole rat, or some sort of thing, biology in me that is the thing that makes mole rats not get cancer, would be that.
That would definitely have, that aspect of it would definitely have to come with being able to interact and get that, like, genetic blueprint out of.
Yeah, definitely could just randomly do that.
Being able to just, it's like, I don't know, I want to be 5 inches taller today, become taller. It's like, it's just really, it sounds petty, but just like in terms of what I'm trying to explain, is that I've basically complete control over my own physical form.
It'd be so much easier. Like, you wouldn't necessarily have to exercise anymore. You'd just be like, I can just dentistry. That'd be easy. That'd be a lot easier, and you could obviously live a lot longer if you
don't have to spend money on haircuts and worry about like cutting nails, like just generally self-maintenance.
Yeah.
No, don't need to bother with any of that.
I'd save so much time. And there's also, excuse me, and what so I think what the other thing I was going to say was, which was aging, because there's certain animals that live a lot longer than humans, isn't there?
I think there's still there's going to be certain things that you can't change, and I think in terms of being human, still aging will just be a thing. Yeah, obviously you could hide it, but you'd still age.
It would depend on the healing thing, because in theory, obviously, I know our biology is so different to like lobsters and lobsters and jellyfish, but I think those two are immortal age-wise, aren't they?
As far as I'm aware, lobsters are basically, in terms of aging, they're immortal.
Yeah,
their deaths mostly result from either us catching them or from, by the time they're adults, actually, mostly physical encounters with other lobsters that they fight. There's not much that actually predates on fully grown lobsters.
Yeah.
And then jellyfish have a thing where they get into that adult form, and then they can basically de-age and just revert back into their polyp form, and then become adult again, and they just like flip back and forward.
Wow. Okay.
And it's really weird. I don't know how they do it. But.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Okay, then that's a pretty cool power. I get that. What about you, Wayne? What would you?
I'd probably go for something like Victor Von Doom from Fantastic Four.
Which specific things?
Pretty much like siphoning energy and then using it to manipulate stuff, because it's like, you look at people like Nikola Tesla, and it's like, if you didn't have to like pay your electric bill, you could just like siphon energy from a local source and then put it into your telly or whatever. You could do that with like so many like other countries and that sort of thing, and just, hey, here's power sort of thing. But also you could use it like to manipulate other things. So the problem with the Hadron Collider in Sweden is, the power is basically there in sort of potential energy, but it's not sufficient enough. Even though they've built it around the summit of the mountain, they cannot get up to the speeds to prove what they want to prove. I mean, it's good in a way, because if they do, obviously they'll create a singularity which will suck us into a giant black hole, but it will prove expansion theory. So yeah, physicists will be happy, but the rest of the world won't. But obviously, if you could like supercharge those types of machines, then and you can use electricity to sort of manipulate all sorts of other things as well. So many different types of technology, like magnetism. You could pretty much greenify the world, by making magnetic cars and all these different things, like free floating, like they've done for bullet trains in China. But obviously, you have to have that sort of power source. But also, as a sort of darker twist, I wouldn't sort of use, everyone sort of says they use their superpowers for like helping people and all this kind of stuff, but I'd use it to sort of enact my own justice, because I think like the legal system just isn't what it was. And like, I'm not saying bring back the death penalty for like any second, but people, the leniency that there is in the system now, I'm just thinking if I had that sort of power that I knew I could take a life, even though I have the conviction that I probably wouldn't, it's having that fear and manipulation over people to say, if you do this, this is what's going to happen, sort of thing.
Yeah, it's like the putting the foot down, in a sense. A lot of it is the deterrent more so than the punishment, and that's what the justice system should be. It should be punishment as a deterrent, but then also rehabilitation. It should be a mix of them, whereas it just seems to be a punishment that doesn't deter enough people and doesn't rehabilitate people. But we can get onto that later as well if we want. But I'll add on my one to finish this nice little random thing up. I initially, because I said about time manipulation, which I have really thought about, and I think that would be fantastic. But obviously, it becomes, the idea of time manipulation comes with all the the sort of real complications that we were discussing, which is like, if I go back in time by 5 years, my physical form won't be 5 years younger. It would be, I would still be, 5 years older. So it would be, if you keep reversing time, you would eventually lose it. But then you could argue, okay, well, like Doctor Strange's, well, the Infinity Stone in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which obviously Doctor Strange has in his films in Infinity War, the Time Stone. He uses it in Doctor Strange with apples. He makes it rot and then turns it back and makes it, ripen not again. And I was thinking, if you could do that to a person, then you could fix the physical form. But the problem is the brain is, Alzheimer's and things like that. Like if you made your brain less, if you made your hand like really young, that'd be fine. It wouldn't do anything. But if you made your brain really young, then you would basically lose memories in theory. So it would kind of not really be the same as rewinding time in a sense. It would be more so, if I would never get hit by a car, because the second I get hit by a car, I just rewind time and I'll be alright. Or little things like that, or you stub your toe and it's okay, rewind time by 5 seconds, and let's just not do that.
The idea that basically if it took you with you in its entirety, of like you also reversed.
Yeah.
It's like essentially a do-over button.
Yeah, exactly. So that would be an interesting idea. And obviously it would improve my quality of life hugely, because I would just be like, okay, well, I'll just win the lottery twice, or every few years I'll just win the lottery or put a bet on something or something like that.
Is this now apart from the idea of this is like you retain your memories as you go back now you're talking about?
Yeah, that's the thing.
If you were going back fully,
it would be the
one.
Yeah.
If you were to get hit by a car and they're like, wait, do over,
yeah,
would you then still just walk in front of that car? In which case,
it's an infinite
infinitely
paradox. Yeah, exactly. That'd be the thing. Which is obviously the problem with most time travel things, and that's the idea of, I think, where partly multiverse theory almost comes to effect, where with time travel, I think the only way it would exist would be if you did time travel and you went back in time to, say, the big one people say is kill Hitler. Well, if you go back in time to kill Hitler, then in present day, Hitler's not there, so you would never go back in time to kill him, therefore he'd be alive, therefore you would have go back in time to kill him. It creates a paradox. And I think what would have to happen is, if you go back in time to stop something happening, whatever world you return to isn't the same world. It is that same world if it had gone that way. So it would kind of almost split, which is where the idea of every conceivable action you have has like a multiverse, where it has every single thing in the entire world is exactly the same up to that point, and then that one decision is different, and then it could be, there's a whole huge idea behind that. But that when you get into that complicated stuff, it becomes a bit of a mindfuck. But I used to always say with certainty the time one, but given the logistics of it, even though it's a obviously very theoretical thing, I think I'd be immortal in the same way Wolverine is. I think it would just be a case of, you shoot me in the head with a gun, I'd be fine, I'd live. I wouldn't get cancer or any ailments that would kill me. I would then never have any fear of basically anything. I could walk through, with Wolverine, I don't think it explicitly says, I know he drinks a lot and stuff, but I don't know how eating works. Does he still have to eat? I don't actually know enough about Marvel, unfortunately. It doesn't really talk about it in the movies. I imagine in the comics it probably goes into more detail. But like, if I still had to eat and drink, fair enough. But then, can he ever drown? That's the idea of, well, maybe he drowns, but then once he comes out of the water, after if I drowned and then someone got me out of the water, I would just come back to life. My cells would regenerate from being dead to alive. So I'm kind of looking way too far into these things. But I think I'd choose the immortal thing, because then I would be able to see how humanity sort of goes, sort of in the future. But the issue would be, when people get their like 100-year birth certificate from the Queen or whatever, if they reach 100, I'd get to 100 and people are like, he looks like he's like 30, 40-ish, and then I'd get to like 200 and people are like, people have lived to 130 maybe, but like 200, he's still fine. And it's like, something's going wrong here. And then you wouldn't know what the government would do, because they would like, how this magic thing would suddenly happen. But like, if they could somehow extract it, then they could make the entire human race immortal, which I think would bring about its own slew of problems. That would be, imagine if all human race could be immortal.
That'd be pretty cool.
What that would do, I think it'd be cool, but the problem is you'd want to stop people having kids, because you've got to think, like, it's basically overpopulation's already happening, going, where I think it was only in the 1850s or something like that, there's only about 1 billion people or 2 billion. There's very, very, very few people only like a couple hundred years ago. And like, if you got rid of people actually dying, because I think you may know better than me, Josh. Is it like I don't know if you even know, I'm just putting you on the spot. The death to life ratio at the moment is like 1.2
I don't know. There's basically, if you're looking at death rate and birth rates, there's definitely more births per second than there are deaths per second.
Yeah, it was something like that because I remember seeing it online, and it's like, well, if you got rid of that, then immediately it would basically, the acceleration would be horrendous.
The idea from what I know from in terms of like terminology and stuff, something called fertility rates, which is number of children per mother. Which is to say, basically, if every female has, I believe it's 2.8 children. That sounds weird, but bear with me. Essentially, within like 3, maybe 4 generations, the population stabilizes perfectly. And it's 2.8 to say basically that every 5th family, every 5th woman has 3 children.
Yeah.
And then that helps to account essentially for infant mortality and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
People that don't live on to reproduce.
Yeah. Yeah. So
you end up with basically you end up with that. Okay, well the population is now at this, and it'll just basically like bit, up and down, up and down, up and down around that point.
Yeah.
So you end up with a stable population size,
right,
which I think is, to be honest, what we need right now.
Yeah.
Sort of like China's one-child policy, but globally enhanced.
In a sense,
And not as draconian.
Yeah, yeah. It'd be a lot more. I've said this in the past of just maybe. With certain exceptions, with like child benefit, for example, you get child benefit on one kid, then the second kid you get a slightly reduced one, and then the third kid you get reduced, then none after that. But if you have twins or octuplets, if you have another kid and you were saying, I'm only going to have my third kid, and then you end up having twins as the third kid, then you'd get this, for the third and fourth kid, you'd get the same child benefit for both, so you'd actually get an additional one. I think that would make sense. There's a reason why that hasn't happened yet. I don't know.
No, choose one, the other one dies.
Just chuck it on.
I am joking completely, just to cover my back.
I think that would that'll probably help curb it a little bit. But there are some theories I've heard about it, which is it's something like when populations. I don't know if this. I hope it isn't anything you just said because I had to check my phone for something, so I missed some of what you said, Josh. Because I'm a terrible podcast host. What they think, obviously, population goes up and up and up, and it does get to a point where it can't go any higher. So I think that I heard about people saying, well, it's not that it can't, but I think people are saying when it gets to about 13 billion or something in the next few decades, it's basically going to peak. And it's because, especially I think the internet's helped a lot, is because people know about it so much, it will be a case of, okay, there are actually too many people, and maybe the government will start putting things in, maybe they won't, but there's the global sort of conscious consensus of we don't need that many more kids anymore, there's way too many already, there's way too many people. But then there's that argument as well, which is when you have people who are generally a lot poorer, they often have a lot more kids. That's been a correlation that I've seen as well. So if we could sort out sort of the global economy and have the Western world not have such huge austerity, then it could be that could balance things out as well. Or even subconsciously, depending on how deep you want to dive, if you think about the whole human race as a global consciousness to a degree, where even you look throughout history, generally speaking, murder and rape, there's been times in history where it hasn't been necessarily universally condemned. Obviously Genghis Khan, those sorts of things as well, especially. But generally speaking, those things, even throughout religious texts, have been don't murder, don't rape. There's a few things that are consistent that people all kind of agree on. And I wonder if there's a universal consciousness to like a really, really subconscious level where like our base, because we will have that kind of base gene thing of generally you want to reproduce. And obviously people that don't want to reproduce don't have kids. So the genes that make you not want to reproduce don't get passed on. So, and the people who have genes that make them want to reproduce make more people who want to reproduce. So it becomes a thing like that. So maybe if it became 13 billion or however many billion people, it would get to a point where, okay, we as humans don't need to overpopulate as much because we're killing ourselves. But then animals don't do that. You have like animals in the wild, which is why we've had to do, which is why there's a certain degree of hunting, which I agree with if it's in the right way and not like, let's send some dogs out and hunt foxes and rip them to shreds. It's more kill them in a humane way, a certain amount. People have to pay for tags, and the tags go towards conservation of the animals. Because one thing I realised that I don't think I mentioned the podcast before, because I was talking to Dom about hunting actually, is it came up on the Joe Rogan podcast, and I hadn't thought about this. People say hunting's really bad, and obviously if you just look at it without delving too deep and explaining all the sort of different things it could be, it does sound you're just slaughtering animals for no reason. But if you look in nature, the way animals actually die naturally is absolutely horrendous. Like disease, starvation, literally like bears and wolves. I think wolves kill things and often eat from the anus first.
Yeah.
And bears don't even kill you before they start eating. They will literally swat you, and if you're just on the floor not moving, they will start eating you. Like, it doesn't matter where they choose, they'll just start eating you. You'll be alive for hours. Obviously, you can bleed out depending where they start getting you.
I'd like to make the point about saying about how, the animals, if they die naturally, are going to die in a horrific way. But then if they're dying in a horrific way, that is the course of natural selection, of removing the things that are not beneficial to the gene pool outside and removing them from the gene pool. Whereas hunting, people are going to go for the big ones and the tough ones and the strong ones because they're the trophies. And I think that's part of the problem.
True.
It's
However,
removal of the good genes from the gene pool.
and I agree with you there. That is a good point. However, there is also the idea that depending on what kind of hunting we're talking about, because if you talk about the kind of hunting I like the idea of is there's miles and miles and miles and miles and miles of woodland area. You can just go in there and try and get one. And obviously, even if you have a gun, with hunters, what they say is you go out, on average, the majority of the time, you won't actually get a kill, as an individual. So if I go out and hunt 5 times, they say you are likely to get 2 kills, maybe 1, because even if you go out and try and hunt a deer, especially in areas where they're already being hunted, they're so aware of humans and they've got those instincts and stuff. If they hear a little rustling, or if the wind, one big thing is if the wind changes and your scent then travels across the wind, they smell you, they know what that is, they'll jet. And so you could almost argue that same as being hunted by a predator like a wolf, the weaker, more stupid animals who don't realise when something's hunting them or tracking them, they get killed, and therefore if you're hunting them, then it could be that sort of idea as well.
That's where I'd add the pretense that although I would say that I'm against sport hunting.
Yeah.
And trophy hunting.
Yeah.
From the sheer point of when it's like some sort of organised thing where they're going out and it's like, we're not coming back until we've killed something. Like that I inherently disagree with.
Right.
But the idea of going out, and if it's for a reason, like either one, you're like, I'm going to go hunt, let's say, in the woods for deer. If I get a deer, I'm gonna butcher it up, eat it, use it for
that's a big
meals
part
and
of it, I
everything.
agree.
Like actual use stuff, or say for example, elephants in Africa, they do need every now and again some population control. They need to be culled because if they're not, then they start just basically destroying all the vegetation and nothing else can survive, and they'll end up eventually both in other populations and their own collapsing. So there is a balance and argument to be had there, but in terms of sport hunting, where you go out with the intent to kill something, to bring its head back, and it's like you don't care what you kill or which one, it's just you get one, and it might be the bloody head of the lion pride or something. And it's like, I think you have to be careful about how you're doing it.
Yeah,
if at all.
I think that's key with being careful of how you do it, because there is a point I heard on a podcast as well, which was it was another Joe Rogan one, and they were saying that this is a part where my knowledge isn't full on this, so this is more of a general thing, but I recommend people to look this up more so than taking 100% my word for it. But it was something like, I can't remember if it's elephants or lions or things, but in Africa there are certain places where you pay a lot of money and you go out on a safari and you hunt, and that sounds really cruel. However, if you have a controlled area of, say, however many miles, and you have a certain amount of lions living there, and you have got people there that if the lions do start getting really ill or start getting really sick, or really bad things to start to happen, the amount of money people pay to go in there to do trophy hunting is used as conservation to save the lions. So you've got a population of 5,000 lions in this big area, but 200 of them do get killed for trophies, which is morally probably not right to do, but there's been times where these places have shut down and then they have to just leave the lions to themselves, and what happens is poachers then come in. And it's one of those ideas of, I'm not necessarily saying it's right or wrong, I don't really know because I don't know the intricate politics of it all, but in that sense I'd say this isn't a rhetorical question, this is one I don't really know the answer to, of is it better to have 5,000 lions, 10% of them are going to get, or 20% are going to get hunted in the earlier parts of their life, which isn't ideal, but the rest of them have a better quality of life. Is that better, or should we more leave it to it? And I think if there were no such thing as poachers and people going around making the rhino extinct and things like that. Well, not all rhinos, but, you know, certain species
Give
of
it
rhino.
time.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. And people, you know, when you get people who cut off elephant tusks while they're alive, just leave the elephants, that's horrendous. It's like, no, you shouldn't do that. It should, I believe it should always, at the very least, without anything else considered, it should always at least be a humane kill. It shouldn't be cause the animal any pain or suffering. You know, that's how I feel. What about you as your paleontologist? Do you have any?
Well, I think if you're going to hunt, then by all means do it only as a culling thing, because at the end of the day, if a population grows out of control, then obviously it's going to have adverse effects on, you know, populations that it's encountering. If, you know, which is what is happening with poaching and trophy hunting, you're actually going for, you know, as Josh said earlier, the bigger and the stronger ones, which would be naturally selected to pass on their genes to the next generation. But also you're hunting things like the Amur leopard. It's already threatened just by global warming, just by, you know, human interference and all that kind of stuff. You're now adding additional pressures for the sake of your libido, or, you know, boosting up basically your ego-driven life because, you know, oh, it puts money on the table, whatever. There are loads of other professions that you can go into that don't involve you mass or, you know, tipping that organism to the brink of extinction. You know, you go back to the last ice age. You know, woolly mammoths, yeah, you could argue that they were driven to extinction by global climate, but if it wasn't due to overhunting by, you know, primitive man, Homo sapiens and Neanderthals, they wouldn't have been driven to the brink of extinction. We probably would just about have seen them in our lifetime. So we probably would have seen them, I don't know, early 1900s. By that, they would have gone extinct, like the dodo or the great auk or something like that. But if you're going to hunt, then, you know, you pick a species which is doing overly well, and you have to take a universal opinion. And I know this is going to sound really dark and twisted, but if you're going to cull animals, then you have to include humans in that. Because at
That's
the
a
end of the
very
day,
interesting thing.
you know, we are all animals, and there is no social hierarchy as far as natural selection is concerned. The same processes, even though we have screwed them to the point where we're now in control of natural selection, we're not fully in control. Control is an illusion. So natural selection is still trying to figure out a way to keep us under control, and it will do. We'll have a mass extinction event, or the population will become so high, as you mentioned before, it will get to a peak. Because if you think about it, not just from the terms of moral conviction or social conviction, but just resources itself. You think of a fire will escalate to a certain point. Once it runs out of fuel source, then it just extinguishes itself. Just the same as the population. If you run out of food or water or electricity, you know, something that sustains life, there's going to be a point where people will just die because of lack of resources, and you'll end up with what I'd say a reboot population, which would be a couple of 100,000 people, which would then have to start the whole process again.
I would agree with the fact that I'm very dead set on the fact that if anything is going to end the human species, it's going to be something that we've done to ourselves.
Yeah, almost certainly. I mean, there's not only the idea of bioweapons, nuclear war, also, as you say, overpopulation, and it's loads of things. But I think, as you said earlier, slightly on your point, Wayne, which was one thing a lot of people think, for example, is I know that one of the arguments for cancer, it seems like it's happening more. A lot of people say it's not necessarily. We have more equipment to detect it more. But there's the other argument, which is it could be happening more because some people argue that there's diseases coming out that in a sense, the Earth, which is a lot of people view as a superorganism, is basically. It's almost like we're a virus. We're killing it. So more natural disasters happen, as you say, Wayne. You know, with we're caused by global warming and climate change, that sort of thing, which can obviously tips the balance of things, makes natural disasters happen and kill people. But also disease can become more rife and things, and super diseases. You know, like some of the diseases that are antibiotic resistant and those sorts of things. And these are evolving and adapting almost not necessarily because there's some sort of controlling like deity necessarily. I'm not saying there is or isn't, but the idea of this conscious of the planet Earth, it's just the balance. It's just there are too many, so it balances out and makes them less. And eventually there's going to be some, I'm not saying it'd be a good thing, but there could be some sort of huge super plague or something like that, which has happened before. You know, there's been the bubonic plague, there's been numerous times. I mean, I think it was a thing where at one point the human species was estimated to go down to only like a few thousand people.
8,000 people.
That's you're the expert. So yeah, with
it was the 12th ice age. They reckon it was caused by a meteorite impact. They've measured a iridium level, but doesn't prove anything. But they reckon it shrunk the human population. I say human, it was Homo habilis, so it was 2 steps before Homo sapiens.
Right.
But it shrunk the population worldwide down to about 8,000 individuals.
Oh wow, okay.
So
yeah, so that sort of thing can happen, and we like to think that because we're almost running our own. It's the human ego. It's like people have that idea that I've been guilty of before, where you kind of think, this really bad thing isn't gonna happen to me. I'm not gonna be in a car crash and die. I'm not gonna get cancer. I'm not gonna, because it's me, and I don't, but that's not a thing. That's completely hubris. It's a human hubris. So it's like, we think we're humans, we'll survive. We make all these sci-fi films. We always seem to have a way. It's like, yeah, but if a meteorite big enough happens to hit us, we're fucked. We're gone. It's maybe not 100% of us, but the way we are at the moment, the whole structure of Earth, if our population goes down to 1% of the population, the infrastructure we have at the moment will not be sustainable. We'd have to change everything completely. But if you think, well, that's still 1% of the Earth. We've got 7 to 8 billion people here. Well, that would 1% is still what 10? Or I think it's 10 million still, wouldn't it? Or 70 million or 80 million. Well, if you go down even more to like on the whole world, if there was only a few 100,000, the way we are now is not sustainable for 100,000 people. It wouldn't work. So it would be an interesting thing there of sort of extinctions and stuff like that. But the human culling, that's a very interesting point. But do you say something?
Interject with something.
Yeah, go ahead.
There is a name for what you're trying to describe.
Okay.
It's known as the Gaia hypothesis.
Okay.
And it's, I know when you're using the word consciousness and all that sort of thing. But I think it's key to underpin it with the idea that it's not something that is like happening with intent.
Yeah.
It's throwback plug for the previous Science But Simple.
Oh yeah.
We talked about the negative and positive feedback systems.
Yes. Yeah.
And that it is a network of all these positive and negative changes and things that that basically self-regulate by just the nature of all their interactions.
Yeah.
Which keeps a stable system. And what humans are doing is basically throwing that whole regulatory system out of whack. To the point where we're going to get to a point where changes happen that mean that we as a species can no longer exist.
Yeah.
And we'll be purged. And then it'll think, all this stuff's no longer happening, what it won't think. But like at that point, our influence on the system is gone. So the negative feedback stuff will pull it back to that central point again.
Yeah. And then from that obviously comes, if we say an example, let's say tomorrow the resources start going out, all humans starve, or almost all humans starve in 100 years, for example. Well, what would happen is then there's obviously the vacuum almost, but all the other animals that are still living among us and things like that, not just domestic pets, but also obviously a lot of the animals in the forest lands nearby that we've destroyed a lot of their environment, their habitats to make human stuff. Well, when we're gone, eventually, plants will, it didn't need to be metaphorical. They will grow over stuff. It will expand. You see it in a lot of films. I Am Legend, one that I think is probably the best example of famous films I've seen where it happens, where New York, eventually, you leave for years and years, the grasslands from certain areas on it, people's gardens, or even the sort of bigger national reserves and national parks, stuff will just overgrow without something, and then it will eventually create more of a untouched human like a habitat that humans haven't touched, and therefore, you'll have a huge spike in certain populations, and then it will, as you say, the feedback systems will come in to change it all and stuff. So yeah, when I say consciousness, I don't necessarily mean it in a hippie, because I assume you mean it was called the Gaia thing, because
Gaia hypothesis,
because of Gaia's the name of Mother Earth, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's the link of, there's that argument of maybe there is a universal consciousness, or maybe there isn't. But either way, there is something which makes it balance. So it's
it's not like it's not a sentient.
Yeah, exactly. I don't believe.
A network of things.
Yeah, I don't believe the Earth is sentient. I want to clarify that.
Yeah.
Not at all. But it's quite interesting to think of it like a human is a superorganism in the sense, because we've got so many bacteria inside us affecting us. Our gut biomes have got millions and millions, if not more, and then you've got the skin flora's got so many, and every part of us has got so much bacteria creating what we are.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And just say that the human body is a habitat.
Yeah,
and you think of that, and it's like, oh, that sounds weird, but it just is like.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so It's a very your idea of human culling, though, Wayne, is very. It's very controversial, but it's very interesting in thought. I mean,
do I even know you anymore?
That's the question.
You've changed since school. It would out of interest. You don't have to. If you just have a vague idea of it, it could be a possibility. But if either of you two would implement it, how would one go about it? In a sense, would you do it based on? Would you do a random thing? Like, have you seen the new Avengers film?
Yeah.
Yeah, just minor spoilers for people of the Avengers film, but you probably would have seen it by now if you're really that into it. But that idea of Thanos wants to kill everyone, but random. He doesn't want to choose the dumbest or the weakest. He wants 100% half of the population of the universe gone by pure random. So you get some of the smartest minds, but some of the dumbest minds, some of the nicest, some of the most horrible. Just everyone completely random, click, gone. Would you, if you had to, say, for some reason the human race, everyone would die, or you had to kill a certain amount of people, would you do it on a more random basis, or would you do it
systematically?
Yeah, and if you don't have to go into ridiculous detail, I don't want people thinking you're going to start cleansing people, but like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
but like
racial purity and all that.
Yeah, exactly.
The second, God forbid.
But have you thought about this at all? If you haven't, that's fine. I'm just interested.
Yeah. We've thought about it. Well, this is going to sound deranged, but I've thought about it quite a few times.
I've thought about a lot of different things. So I wouldn't worry about it.
No, I'd probably use like a random sequence generator, like with computers. So you'd have a massive supercomputer with everyone's details on it.
A giant census.
And you'd basically have everyone's details, and you'd be like, right, okay, a random sequence. You'd all have a global consensus on a number that you're going to pick of how many people, and pretty much everyone, I would say, that's either legitimate for it or of a certain age group or whatever, you would just have, right, there's going to be a random poll and it's going to select all those people. But obviously you're going to have so many, like, you're going to have emotional attachment to literally everybody.
Yeah.
So what I would probably do is first off integrate it into the criminal system. Mm-hmm. So you would have, obviously, those that are not so much... You'd have those deserving, or I use it loosely, of the death penalty, and you have those as close to it as possible. And you'd say, right, we'll take a random sequence of them first. Have people that are both in the justice system as well as outside of the justice system, so it's a balanced thing, and say, right, we'll pick a consensus of them and basically see if that sort of, becomes basically the social norm. Because the one thing you don't want to do is do this mass genocide, like... thing, and just like the effect of the Holocaust, it's remembered for hundreds of years, but never from the intention, as like I say, as dark and twisted as it sounds, you never look to it from Hitler's point of view. You always associate him as this egocentric megalomaniac who just was out to wipe out an entire race of people.
Yeah.
But if you actually look through his psyche and look to the reason behind it, and the detriment that he deludedly thought was happening to his perfect society, a lot of those ideologies still exist now, because we still have a lot of elitist societies that believe that white races are superior to other races, in certain countries, or some religions or some beliefs feel that they are superior. So including them in this global consensus and just adding it sort of group by group over a series of like 100 years or whatever, it would sort of humble those people that think I'm too good to die, but also make people think that, oh, I'm looking forward to death. It's bringing it closer to them, because for a lot of people, as horrible as it is to admit, a lot of people won't be reached before they die. You see it on the telly all the time that people are dying because of lack of water, because of babies going blind because there's a parasite eating their retinas, and you're just like, I so wish I could reach you in time to prevent that and stop that. But because of the restrictions, financially, politically, all these different kinds of restrictions that I have, I can't guarantee I'm going to reach you in time. So to have that sort of cull in place, it's almost like a global euthanasia side of things as well. But also you could look at it from that wider point of view, that people that are in hospital beds that would like to be put out of their misery, perhaps they could say, could I have a list, maybe bump myself up the consensus to have me, I'm guaranteed a spot on that consensus. And you could have people actually not purchasing, but saying, because I have a terminal illness, I'd like to go out on my own terms. I'd like to put myself on there. And then once you've got those spaces filled, then it becomes more random after that's been done.
So there's more of key sort of compartmentalising of, there's a higher concentration of, say, criminals proportionally to the general populace, but also people with terminal if they want to be, that sort of thing. And I think I want to pretense, because obviously you brought up hit on the Holocaust thing, it's a weird one, but obviously we can all here agree Holocaust was one of the most heinous things anything that's ever happened. But one of the things is, obviously, what Hitler wanted to do was the idea of, as you say, there wasn't enough to go around, so you want to cull it. His idea of who he wanted to cull was wrong, obviously, because the Jews, there's nothing.
It was almost viewed as like trying to cleanse a disease.
Exactly, which is where the huge flaw of it comes. However, one of the things I've heard people say before, once again, I need to preface this, I'm not saying the Holocaust was good at all, but it did unfortunately bring some benefit because of there were less people. And that's what happens with any mass culling, any horrendous big event that kills loads of people. Once people have recovered from the psychological damage and all the horrendousness that comes with everything else of how unpleasant it is, it does often bring a degree of positivity in the sense of enough resource to go around. I mean, one of them also, another thing, is psychologically speaking, is 9/11. Horrendous thing that happened. Obviously, quite a few thousand people died. That was horrendous. But a lot of people say in New York, for years and years afterwards, the community was so much tighter that I think crime statistics actually show crime went down for several years afterwards, because people were nicer to each other, because there was a more that community caring about your neighbour aspect of it. So I'm with the human culling thing. I'm not saying I would necessarily be for it. It's a very interesting thought experiment, and obviously, I'm not saying it's necessarily it would be a good or necessarily a bad thing. I think where we are as it stands, maybe it wouldn't be necessary because of. But it's that idea of utilitarianism, isn't it? Is it better for 80% of the population to live? Let's say if we rate things out of 10, say everyone on average is living a 5 out of 10 goodness in life. You know, there's some people who have horrendous, some people have good. But on average, out of happiness, out of 10, everyone in the world averages at like 5. Well, if we killed 20% of people, but everyone bumped up to 8 out of 10, would that be better? And there's that thing of, if you look at it in a Thanos way or in a non-human way, look third party, like a computer deciding things, objectively it would be better, but only for those who survived once you got over the initial hump. You know, after a generation or so had gone, once no one who knew the people who'd been killed, then it'd be all right. It's sort of thing. So it's certainly an interesting idea. What about you, Josh? What do you think about a human cull? Obviously, I want to clarify, it's even saying it sounds horrendous. I want to clarify, I'm not saying I'm for it. I can understand the benefits, and I can obviously understand the bad parts, and I'm not saying I'm for or against it. It's more of a very interesting thing to think about. But Josh, what's your...
I would probably exclude children, and people with dependents, so people that have children that can't look after themselves without it.
Okay.
But I feel like I would go with literally just total randomness, because you could try and go with, I want to choose the people that contribute most to society. But at which point you say, okay, well, do you then select out, say, a lot of the cultural stuff, but that has intrinsic value? I don't think there's a way of properly quantifiably valuing different things against each other. So I think that to say that would be wrong. The other potential idea I would go by would be if you're above a certain age. I'd say because over 25 or something. I'm thinking of like the elderly in terms of the people that have the least left to contribute.
I see. So if you're over 70, then it's a much higher chance of you being in this cull sort of thing. Is that more the idea?
No, as in it's basically like, if you're above this age and you're like saying retired or whatever, does that...
That's a fair enough point. I mean, there's that, I can't remember if it's in a film or a book or something, but maybe I'm imagining it, but an idea of when you get over the age of like 80 or something, everyone goes to this one nation, this one island, and you go there and you have 6 months of living. It's like a hospice almost, but you live you kind of do whatever you've always wanted. You're treated like a king almost for 6 months, but then at the end of the 6 months, you've got to that age, it's time for you to go to benefit everyone else. It's a really interesting idea, actually.
I feel like in terms of choosing that option, in terms of if you're like killing the most elderly because they have the least left to contribute, I feel it does raise the question of, well, if people have contributed all their lives and then as soon as they stop contributing, it's like, nope, no more time left for you. I feel that's really... I don't like that idea, but in terms of like trying to think about how to organise this population, if you were to do human population control, how would you do it? I feel like in terms of increasing the, like as you say, the utilitarian aspect of the amount of good that people can do. Once people get to a certain point, they can no longer constructively contribute.
Yeah. And also it means that if we did the idea of, hypothetically, I was like, let's Mike Burton and Wayne Telford and Josh Murray, we're all going to do a coalition and then start the human cull. But obviously, if I got to 80 or something, I mean, a lot of people I talk to our age, a lot of friends, in fact, Callum, I think, and Kieran both said they don't even want to get to 80 because they go, once you get to that sort of age, even if you're really healthy, you get to a point where you just can't continue to be healthy. It's like you can keep doing exercise till you're an old age and you can keep doing jogging or exercise, eating healthy, but it gets to a point where if you're exercising regularly, you increase your chances of, say, a heart attack and lots of other joint issues and that sort of thing, but you reduce your chances of, say, cancer and sort of other things, but it still increases your chance of other things killing you. If you're 85 and you're jogging every day, you're probably less likely to die of certain cancers that are to do with certain almost, I don't know all the details, so I'm not even going to say words that are going to be stupid, but you know what I mean. But it does increase your chances of a heart attack. So it's like, well, once you get past 80 something, I'd probably say you've only got a certain amount of time left. And if you also don't exercise at all, well, then it will accelerate anyway.
At the same time, I'd rather much have a heart attack and be gone than to have cancer for 3 years and go out in agony.
Yeah, exactly. You know,
I think.
I agree there.
Honestly, to move on to a slightly different topic.
That's what it's all about.
On the same vein.
Tangentially speaking, let's go.
The idea of legalizing euthanasia for people, I
100%.
think, is. I don't even know why there's debate, really.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you.
Like, it's not about saying, it's one of those things where people will be against it, but it's like, if someone chooses to do this, that does not affect you in any way. Like,
it's
what has
not just choosing, like, tomorrow you go, I want to die, and go, it's not like in Futurama, the suicide booth. That's the complete wrong way of doing it.
You have all pathways and legislation and things to make sure, people with terminal illnesses, all that sort of thing. Like, there is a due course and process to go through. But the idea of not allowing somebody to go out on their own terms when they're basically in, like, they have been given a death sentence anyway.
100%.
I just don't.
Which that idea of also, none of us chose to be born. We choose to continue to live, but there are some people who have, I think Scroobius Pip says it, who's another podcaster and a rapper that I really like. He actually was one of the ones that got me into podcasting, actually. He was saying he would like to, when he gets to 60 or 70 or something, just die then, just euthanasia or whatever, because he's like, he doesn't necessarily want to live forever, and he doesn't want this. He doesn't, and also the pain of dying and going on your own, as Josh was saying, like, you want to go off on your own terms, and it's people, you shouldn't. Scroobius Pip had a very close friend of his who killed himself as well, which obviously suicide is a horrendous thing that ravages our society, especially for young males our sort of age. And it's like, well, some people, whether or not you say there's an issue with their brain and that it's just they don't have enough serotonin, anything like that, or if it's just some people just don't want to live anymore. Some people live, they live 30 years on this earth, and they've done all the good things that everyone enjoys. They've played video games, gone to the cinema, gone to the zoo, had sex, done drugs, everything, and they're like, I've tried it all, relatively speaking, and none of it is as enjoyable as the unpleasantry of the effort of having to live is. Because it is a lot of effort to live, isn't it? I mean, having to feed yourself, hygiene, food, care about social sort of standings where a lot of anxiety and stuff comes from, as well as bills and finances, world politics, having to, even in social situations where you have to know certain things about either what's going on in the world or know about media, all these sorts of pressures and stuff. Some people are fine with that. Most people generally seem to be, but a lot of people just think, and that's far too much effort. I would rather be in this infinite abyssal sleep where I'm not in pain or not. And my idea is everyone's going to die eventually. So for me personally, I haven't been so depressed I want to kill myself. So I want to clarify that before saying this. But for me personally, I would say, even if I'm in loads of pain, I will just ride it out to the end because I'm going to die anyway. However, obviously a lot of people don't have that mindset. And it should be, if you want to kill yourself, it shouldn't be like if you try a suicide booth, 25 cents in a booth, you're gone without a few seconds notice, because people will get drunk and have moments of weakness, or they may not want to actually do that in 99% of their life, but they have a moment where they do and they do it. It should be, okay, you talk to a psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever, you get evaluation, you speak to all your family, your friend, everyone around you, you have to have a system of, okay, if you want to kill yourself for 2 years, and you go to an appointment with a psychiatrist every month, and then the last year it's every couple of weeks you see them, and you're still like, and you try all these things they tell you to try. You try changing your diet, you try maybe some antidepressants, you try changing your lifestyle, all sorts of things, and you're like, I just don't want to live anymore. We shouldn't force you to. If it gets to that point, it's unfortunate for the family who care about you, and you really don't. The family members are like, I want you to live because I don't want to live without you. But at the end of the day, you can't make that decision for someone. And it's not like no one kills themselves now anyway. If I want to kill myself that bad anyway, I could just go do it. But if I have to do it myself, it's not going to be as pleasant as euthanasia, or even if everyone wanted to kill themselves. You go live in this little resort for, a few months, and if you're really old, you live there for 6 months, then you die. Or if you're young, or like our sort of age, and you're depressed, live there for 3 months, you get a review, or you get a review every couple of weeks. And if you're living this, air quotes, perfect life, and you still want to go, then the last however many months was really pleasant, really enjoyable. You get to say goodbye to everyone the way you want to, and then you get nicely euthanized, no pain, no problem. Rather than, some of the people ODing or hanging yourself or jumping off buildings, and not to mention the thing of, I think me and Tom discussed this before, where suicide, if you jump in front of a train, it's an easy, quick way to go, but it really. This sounds really sensitive, but inconveniences everyone else's day. Like, not to be an asshole, but if you jump in front of a train, you could severely psychologically damage the driver of the train. If you are at a train station, you watch someone kill themselves, they hit the front of a train, they splat everywhere, that's going to mess you up. And people shouldn't have to go to those lengths if they actually want to end it, but you should give them the help they need. So it's a very interesting idea of human culling. If you guys have anything to add to that, because I just went off on one.
Something you said that's reminded me of something else. When you said about none of us have chosen to be born, reminded me of people I'm aware of that are so-called anti-natal.
Okay.
Which I think I've discussed with you at some point before.
Yeah, I recognise the name.
Essentially, people that they're not like aggressive about it. It's like, these are my personal views. It's not like everyone must be like this.
Yeah.
But people that take the moral standpoint of like complete utilitarianism, the fact that if I produce a child, I cannot guarantee that child will not experience suffering, in which case I cannot morally justify bringing that child into the world because I feel like it was wrong. It did not have the choice to do so.
Yeah.
And I will be inflicting pain on something.
Yeah.
By bringing it into the world.
100%.
And it's like, I understand that viewpoint. And people that choose not to procreate.
Yeah, and you can either adopt or think like in fact Molly, who obviously you guys both know from school when she was on the podcast. I can't remember if she just said it in the podcast or out of the podcast, but she said she's likely with her boyfriend. She doesn't want to actually necessarily have kids, but she does want to adopt or foster because she, in her opinion, she thinks either, I can't remember if she said this part specifically, but this is part of the idea of like, if I use me for an example, so it's not talking about someone else, but me, I do want to have kids one day, but I could say, well, I don't want a kid of my own because I don't want to give a kid asthma, hay fever, allergies, and because of the line of cancer in my family, maybe not bring a kid into the world because I don't want to make them suffer, as you say. So maybe I will want to foster or adopt or anything like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. And anti-natalism being, I don't think anyone should really have kids. If you do, I'm not going to stop you or do anything malicious, but in opinion, I think it's better imagine if for like 10 years, just people didn't really have kids. Like, I know obviously it's kind of maybe not fair to people who are 28 or a woman who's 28, for example, she does want a kid at some point, but she maybe wants it in 3 years' time, and then you say, you have to have it now or in 10 years. Maybe she wouldn't have that time, but that's another thought experiment, which would be quite cool. Imagine if we could just see Earth, and we had this weird thing where you can like, I think it's been done in Futurama actually, where it's like a what-if machine, where you go, what if we just, we prepared everyone for it. We gave everyone, say, right, 5 years, you've got the deadline. Okay, in 5 years' time, at this point, mass infertility bomb almost. No, everyone's infertile for 10 years, and then afterwards, everyone gets fertile again. That'd be a really interesting thing to do. Or another thing I thought of, which is I wish the world was almost more like this. Wouldn't it be great if everyone was just infertile, and then you have to take a pill to make yourself fertile? Imagine you had to take a pill.
Actively make the decision to reproduce.
Imagine if you had to take a pill where, you literally have to take this pill every day, both male and female, for 3 months. And if you can do that without, say, the pill only works if you don't drink and you don't do that, you're healthy enough and you don't drink, there could be a sort of thing of, if you're committed to bringing a child into this world and being the best life you can give it, you have to do this thing that kind of makes sense. It doesn't seem to me to be too ridiculous to say someone has to take a pill. I mean, obviously there's the idea of what if the pill doesn't work for some people, blah blah blah, but people are infertile anyway. So that's another thought experiment I thought I'd throw at you both, an idea.
Yeah, it would certainly get rid of the problem of abortion, because if you think about it, if you're not bringing that child into the world in the first place, then it's not a quote-unquote inconvenience.
Exactly, yeah. And abortion it's that idea of, is abortion in any stage killing a baby? You know, there's the idea of, even when it's just cell splitting, I think if it's in the early days, you just take the pill, fizzles, it's gone, essentially. I would argue that's not, but a lot of people do argue that it is still. Once the egg's been fertilised, it will be a baby if you leave it, so that is, in theory, killing a baby. I don't think it's equivalent to killing a baby that is alive, but it's stopping that, and, you know, you kind of have to look at it like that in some ways, especially the later stages of pregnancy when you can get it taken care of, essentially, and it's a grey area where people get really upset about it a lot, and it's obviously it's not a pleasant thing for someone to go through, but there's that, it's almost a utilitarian argument, isn't it, of, would I want to bring a baby in this world that I can't take care of? It's going to have this horrendous life for 10, 15 years because I'm poor, my relationship's bad, I'm ill, blah, 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 blah. Or I could just, unfortunately, get rid of it. It makes it sound so dehumanising, but, you know, get rid of it 5, 10 years down the line when I'm ready, better life, you know? So I do think that is a...
I think the biggest point to contend with there is I also go with the utilitarian approach to that.
Yeah.
But the same people a lot of the time that would be the ones to say, oh no, abortion is bad, it's murder, are the same ones that as soon as that baby is born will be complaining about the amount of their taxes that are going into the welfare state.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's like you're fine for that baby to be born, but as soon as it is born, you're like, no, it's your responsibility to take care of it under your money and all that thing, not my money. My taxes going towards welfare. No. It's like, you're not pro-life, you're pro-birth.
Moral cherry picking,
I guess.
That's almost what it is, isn't it? It's just like, you want to... That's the whole thing with the left and the right a lot of the time, this whole dichotomy of political systems, which often comes up because you get people who like to try and be so moral about one thing, but then not about the other. And these, obviously, being morality in general is quite a subjective thing, depending on the individual as well as the culture, all kinds of other things. But it is, I think, just pro-choice. You should be able to choose to have an abortion or not within reason. I mean, it shouldn't have a girl who can just keep getting pregnant because she doesn't use condoms because she can't be bothered, and then just has an abortion every few, months or whatever. That's completely wrong. But in the instances, obviously rape is the big one, where definitely people should be able to get aborted if they're raped. But also, sometimes accidents can happen. Sometimes you can use a condom, you can use the pill, you can pull out, do every method, but you can still inseminate sometimes. It's part of that. Is there anything you guys want to add to that? Because I was going to move on to something else, but I don't know if you have anything else to add to abortion, euthanasia, or human culling. I was going to go on to the other subject we were talking about, but I don't want to do that until you guys have... If there's anything else you want to add?
I think just the idea that it's also one of the big socio-political things of separating what we consider as moral and what we consider as legal, and that legal doesn't mean moral, and moral doesn't mean legal. Like, there are things that are illegal that are moral, and there are things that are legal which I would probably consider quite immoral, and the two things are quite distinct from each other. Yeah,
especially because obviously laws are not unanimous across the globe.
No.
That's obviously the very big thing, even amongst Europe, even in England, like obviously Ireland, that was a big one. I think abortion was only recently...
yes,
it was illegal.
Very recently, like a few weeks ago.
Yeah. The poll was like, I think it was like, what was it? It was like a sway of 33% disagreed. So it was like a massive...
There's a big majority.
Huge majority for it.
It was like 2/3 almost, basically, 1 in 3 people to believe that there should be, and it should be. It's a choice. It's one of those people. It's one of those things where people telling others how to live. It's not right. And with euthanasia, telling them that you have to live, and all these sorts of other things. It's just, as long as people aren't hurting anyone else, let them do it. And
the people that will be like, no, you can't tell me how to live, but you can't have an abortion. It's like double standards much.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, Jesus Christ.
How can you even vote? I just disagree with people saying who vote against abortion. It's just upsetting to me, because it's just like, there's a lot of people I know who, especially women, who if they ever got pregnant, they said they would keep the baby because they would never get something aborted, and that's perfectly fine. If if you're 19, I know people who they said they wouldn't, who've had kids when they were 19. They said they wouldn't have chosen to have a child at 19, but they believe that in their personal view that an abortion is not a morally right thing to do in their own life. They've got nothing, they completely understand someone else doing it, but they personally would never want to. And that's what pro-choice is. If you believe that way, and if you are a religious individual who believes it is killing a baby, or you aren't religious and you just think it's not the morally right thing to do, perfect, you don't have to do it. You have the choice. If you get pregnant at a young age or any reason, you can have it. But people who don't want that, or that it's a detriment to them, there's even in, like, with Ireland, it was things like, one of the big arguments was obviously, I think the only time you were allowed to have an abortion, I think, was if the mother was going to die, if the baby was going to kill them if they were going to be born. But there's things like rape and that sort of thing. It's just like, what? I can't.
Yeah, and people that argue against it, it's like, well, if you don't want the baby dying, because a lot of the time it's like you've killed them before they've had a chance to, like, contribute in some way. It's like, okay then, donate them to stem cell research. If they're going to be killed anyway,
yeah,
at least let them contribute to a cure for cancer, a cure for diabetes, something like that. So then at least they have contributed something. Yes, it's, completely inhuman where they're being scrambled up into basically what is a whisk, but
yeah,
taking those stem cells, which could then regrow someone's amputated limb or, completely, reform someone else's life, it's almost like organ donation at the end of the day,
100%.
Yeah.
So it's like if you are sacrificing a baby which is otherwise an inconvenience, well then give someone else a chance to survive. Someone who's desperately waiting for a liver transplant which isn't going to come, it's like, well, we have the cells, we can grow one in like a few days and get it into you from your own cells, so there's not going to be any issue of your body not recognizing it or anything like that. We can grow it from your cells with the use of this fetus that was otherwise unwanted.
Exactly. It's all about using, and that's what I kind of think about with the hunting element of it, which is why I'm not as for trophy hunting unless the conservation element outweighs it if there's population issues, but obviously we'll discuss that. But with hunting, with deer hunting and things like that, you're going to cull the population, okay, but when you kill them, take as much meat as you can, feed, like Joe Rogan often does, feed your family, then you don't have to buy from the store, then there's no factory farming, and other stuff, like you can give the bone or the this or the that to either, like, you can give it to animal places where they'll just blend it all up and feed to animals, which is completely fine for them. There's all kinds of things you can do. It's about not wasting. And that's where the thing I agree with you in completely with the abortion thing is, if this person can have an abortion anyway, why just, air quotes, bin the baby thing if it can be used for something? It should always be, we should not be wasting as much, And that's the end of the podcast. Thanks as always for tuning in, guys. As I said at the start, next week it will be another podcast with Josh and Wayne. And if that audio sounded like it cut off a little bit, it's because we did have the conversation in one go. I just felt that it was... that the first half of the conversation and the second half of the conversation did differ quite a nice amount, and I didn't want to sort of have it as a part 1, part 2 situation, whereas some of the other podcasts I've done, like the ones with Justina, for example, it was very much part 1 and part 2 due to the sort of the flow of the conversation and there not being such cemented sort of splittings between them. Sounds weird. It'll make more sense when you listen to the next one. Maybe you won't agree with me. If you don't, let me know. And as I said at the start of the podcast, Wayne has been a guest on 2 other episodes of Genuine Chit-Chat. Episode 16 called Be the Beacon of Hope, where he spoke about his books, as well as sort of the human condition, following your passions, good versus evil, that sort of thing. And episode 17, which is What is Palaeontology, where Wayne gives like a general... I just basically talked to him about paleontology for an hour or so, because obviously I'm not that knowledgeable about it, so I thought I'd just ask a few questions that came to mind. Anyway, guys, thanks as always for tuning in. Just a reminder of the shout out for the Cloth Talk podcast. All the details and whatnot are in the description. Hope you guys have a great week, and well, I'll talk to you next week.